This review of the 5th chapter of Luke is intended to help reinforce the main points you've considered in reading and researching this chapter. There are 4 main sections in the chapter, and we will consider each one briefly. First, Jesus instructed Peter on how to catch fish in the Sea of Galilee. Then he cleansed a leper. On another occasion, he healed a paralytic that was lowered to him through the roof of the house where he was teaching. Finally, he called a tax collector to be his disciple and sought out others who were willing to listen to him, then answered a question about fasting. Each of these sections provides us with insight into the purpose of Jesus and his ministry. The first scene opens by the Sea of Galilee. Jesus climbed into a fishing boat to teach the multitudes who were crowding the shoreline to hear him. When he finished, he told Peter to launch out into the deep and lower his nets. Even though Peter had fished unsuccessfully through the night, he exercised true faith in Jesus. He said, "At your word I will let down the net." The catch was so great that the nets began to break. When Peter saw this and realized that if the Lord could see into the water where the fish were, he could see into his heart to know what kind of man he was, he fell on his knees and asked Jesus to depart from him, a sinful man. But instead of sending him away, Jesus asked Peter and his brethren to follow him, which they did. The next scene reveals a leper who approached Jesus and begged Jesus to make him clean. Leprosy was a terrible disease for which there was no cure, only isolation from others because it was contagious. Yet Jesus touched him and pronounced him clean. And the leprosy left him immediately. He told the leper to go to the priest as the law commanded. Even though Jesus urged the man not to tell anyone, many heard the report about this miracle and the crowds grew bigger. Luke then describes an occasion where a paralytic man was lowered through the roof of the house into the presence of Jesus, who was teaching a crowd. Jesus told the man his sins were forgiven. This was an astounding claim, shocking to the religious leaders in attendance, who assumed that Jesus was speaking blasphemy against God himself. Why, God was the only one who could forgive sins. Did Jesus have this authority? The only way to provide visible proof of this invisible spiritual power was for Jesus to do a miracle that everyone could see. So in order to demonstrate his power to forgive sins, Jesus told the man to get up and walk with his bed to his house. The man obeyed immediately, and the crowd of people were amazed. The last scene in this chapter is where Jesus saw Levi, the tax collector, sitting at his tax office. Levi, who in the next chapter is identified as Matthew, answered the call of Jesus to follow him. We are told that he left all. In doing so, he then gave a great feast at his house in honor of Jesus. The scribes and Pharisees were offended because they thought these people were sinners and wanted nothing to do with them. Jesus told them that a physician treats sick people, not healthy ones. He came to call sinners to repentance, not the righteous. The real problem with the religious leaders was that they were unaware that they needed the spiritual cleansing that Jesus could give them. This scene with Jesus at the feast that Matthew had offered him seemed to spark one more question at the end of the chapter. Jesus was asked why his disciples ate and drank while others fasted. Jesus' answer was twofold. First, he said that fasting was inappropriate during a time of rejoicing, such as a wedding. In other words, he likened his ministry, his time among the multitudes, as a time to rejoice while Jesus was in their presence. Then he added the image of trying to put new wine into old wineskins, pointing out that such a practice would burst the wineskins and ruin the wine. This image was a way of telling his querists that they could not force the new covenant Jesus taught into the wineskins of the old covenant it was replacing. These events draw attention to the power that Jesus possessed, catching fish where there had been none, cleansing a leper, and healing a lame man. These visible healings demonstrated his power to provide spiritual healing in the form of forgiveness of sins. His mission was to call men like Peter and Matthew to go and seek others. Such a commitment requires faith on the part of those who follow, but a faith that is prompted by the signs Jesus did. This concludes our summary of Luke chapter 5. You are ready to read and research chapter 6, in which Jesus chooses his apostles and teaches marvelous lessons to the multitudes. Remember, if you have questions from your study, you may select the link at the bottom left and send them to us on the form provided. We will reply as quickly as we can. Our desire is to provide you with an opportunity to study this great Gospel of Luke.